I grew up in a little town in southern Nebraska called Clay Ridge. You'd miss it if you blinked driving by. 2 streets, a post office that's barely open, and a diner that somehow outlived the factory that once fed it. Everyone knows everyone, or at least everyone thinks they do. And if there's one thing everyone in Clay Ridge knows, it's to stay away from the old grain silos down on County Road 11. There are 3 of them, massive concrete towers left behind by a feed company that went bankrupt sometime in the late 70s. They stand out against the horizon like monuments to something ugly, and the town swears they're cursed. When I was 13, I didn't believe any of that nonsense. My friends and I used to ride our bikes past the fence line, daring each other to get closer every summer. We'd heard all the stories, kids disappearing, lights in the silos at night, the screams of animals that didn't sound like any livestock we'd ever heard. But we figured it was just the usual small-town ghost stories meant to scare the hell out of bored teenagers. That changed the summer of 2004. I remember it was hot. So hot the air felt like it was humming. My mom was working the night shift at the nursing home, and my dad was on the road hauling grain up to Sioux City. I was supposed to be home by dark, but the sun dipped slower than usual that night, and I found myself near the silos just as the sky turned orange. There was something different that night. The air smelled strange, like rust and something sour. The cicadas were loud. Then all at once, they stopped. I thought maybe there was a storm coming. Then I heard it, a knocking sound echoing from one of the silos. Slow, hollow, almost rhythmic. I remember walking closer, telling myself it was just metal contracting in the heat. But the closer I got, the more it sounded like someone, or something, was inside, pounding to get out. There was a ladder running up one of the silos, rusted half to hell. I shouldn't have climbed it, but I did. Halfway up, I looked down and saw something that made my stomach drop. There was a boy standing near the bottom of the silo. He looked maybe 8 years old, way younger than me, and he was just staring up at me. His clothes looked wrong, like they were from another time. A flannel shirt buttoned to the neck, and overalls that were too big. I shouted down, asking if he was okay, but he didn't move, didn't blink. I climbed down fast, heart hammering. When my feet hit the dirt, he was gone, just gone. I remember sprinting back to my bike, and as I did, I heard that knocking again, louder this time, desperate. I looked back, and for just a second, I saw the boy again, standing on the other side of the chain-link fence, pale and dirty, watching me ride off into the dark. When I got home, I told my mom everything. She went pale. She told me not to talk about it to anyone. Not at school, not to my friends, no one. I didn't understand why. Not until years later. When I was 22, I ran into the old sheriff at the diner one morning. He was retired by then and a few cups deep into his coffee. We got to talking about the silos, and when I mentioned the boy, his hand froze halfway to his mouth. He told me that back in 1973, a kid named Eli Tabor went missing during a field trip to the feed plant, the same one that owned the silos. They found his lunchbox and his shoe, but not him. The company went under a few months later after a worker fell into one of the silos and was ground up in the machinery. The sheriff said no one ever found Eli's body. They filled the silos with concrete a few years after that, sealed them for good. But every few years, someone reports hearing knocking from inside. I hadn't thought about that summer in a long time, not until last month when I came back to Clay Ridge for my dad's funeral. I stayed with my mom out by the edge of town, and one night the power went out during a thunderstorm. As I was checking the fuse box outside, I looked toward County Road 11. For just a moment, a flash of lightning lit up the horizon, and I swear I saw a small figure standing by those old silos. The next morning, I drove out there just to prove to myself it was nothing. The fence was still there, half collapsed. The air still smelled like rust. And right near the ladder, pressed into the dry dirt, were the faint tracks of bare feet. Small feet. I didn't stick around. People in Clay Ridge still say the silos are haunted, but they've got it wrong. It's not haunted. It's hungry. And every so often, when the summer air gets heavy and the cicadas fall silent, you can still hear Eli Tabor knocking from inside, waiting for someone stupid enough to come close enough to let him out.
I grew up just outside a place called Mill Creek, Kansas. It's not even on most maps anymore. Population's maybe 200 on a good day. The kind of place where Friday night football is church and gossip travels faster than the weather. It's quiet, steady, and predictable. Except for one thing that's never been explained. Every few years, usually in late September, people claim to see lights above the creek, floating, drifting, sometimes darting through the trees. Some say it's swamp gas, some say UFOs. But everyone who's ever seen them agrees on one thing. If you follow them, you don't come back the same. My uncle saw them first. It was 1989. He was 16, sneaking out with friends to drink beer down by the water. Around midnight, he came running home, white as a sheet, clothes soaked like he'd fallen in. He wouldn't say what happened. Not then, not ever. But he never went near the creek again. He moved to Wichita after high school and didn't come back. When I was 16, I thought I was braver, or maybe just dumber. Either way, I wanted to see the lights for myself. It was a warm September night, the air thick with crickets and the smell of alfalfa. I parked my old Ford pickup by the bridge and walked the trail down to the creek. Moonlight spilled through the cottonwoods and the water shimmered like oil. At first, there was nothing, just frogs, the distant hum of the highway, and my own heartbeat in my ears. I waited. Then, there it was, a glow, pale and green, rising just above the waterline. It wasn't like a flashlight or a lantern. It was too smooth, too alive. It drifted along the creek, twisting and pulsing, like it was breathing. Then, as if it knew I was watching, it stopped, hovered, turned toward me. Every instinct I had screamed to leave, but I didn't move. I remember feeling this weird pull, like curiosity turned into gravity. I took a step forward. The air went cold. Then, out of nowhere, I smelled something. Iron, wet dirt, and rot. The kind of smell that clings to your clothes for days. The glow brightened until it was almost white, and I could see something inside it. Not light, a shape, a face. It looked like my uncle. But wrong. His eyes were black pits, his mouth twisted open in a silent scream. I stumbled backward, tripped over a root, and hit the ground hard. When I looked again, the light was gone. I must have lain there for a few minutes, trying to catch my breath. Then I saw something else. Dozens of little lights drifting down from the trees, like fireflies, but slower, heavier. They began to form a circle over the creek, and inside that circle, the water started to ripple even though there was no wind. Something was rising. At first I thought it was a log. Then I saw a hand. It was pale, bloated, fingers curled and blue. Another hand followed, then a head, hair floating like weeds in the current. It was a body. I couldn't move. I just watched as it drifted to the bank, and then I realized The face was mine. I don't remember getting back to my truck. I don't remember the drive home. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was in bed, clothes muddy, fingernails packed with dirt. My mom said I'd come in around 3, banging on the door like I'd been chased. When I told her what I saw, she didn't laugh or yell. She just looked sad. Then she said something I'll never forget. Your uncle came home the same way. I tried to tell myself it was a dream, a trick of the dark, anything but what it felt like. But a few days later, they found something down by the creek. A deer carcass, stripped clean, eyes gone, skin pale like wax. The sheriff said it was coyotes. Everyone else said it was the lights. Years went by. I moved to Topeka, got married, had kids. I didn't think about Mill Creek much. But last fall, I got a call from my mom. She said my uncle had passed away. When I drove back for the funeral, I decided to take the long way, past the old bridge. The creek was lower than I remembered, and the air smelled of mold and rain. But as I crossed, I looked out over the water, and for a split second, I saw something glowing beneath the surface. A pale green shimmer. And in the reflection of my windshield, a face, mine, looking up at me from the water. They say the lights over Mill Creek are souls looking for a way home, but I think that's just what people tell themselves so they can sleep. Because if you ask me, those lights aren't lost souls, they're traps. And once they see your face, they never stop calling you back.
I grew up in a small town in northern Iowa called Bracken Hollow. You could drive through it in under 3 minutes, and most folks did without even realizing there was a town there. Just a few rows of old houses, some still lived in, others long abandoned. At the far end of Main Street, there's a house everyone in Bracken Hollow calls the Whistler's house. It's been empty longer than I've been alive. My parents said the man who built it, a clockmaker named Russell Veit, died in there sometime in the 1960s. The police found him sitting at his kitchen table with every window shut tight and every clock in the house stopped at 2:17 a.m. People in town say that if you walk past that house at night, you'll hear someone whistling from inside. Not a tune you can recognize, just long, drawn-out notes that float through the air like something trying to remember a melody. When I was a kid, we dared each other to walk past it. I did once, when I was 11. It was late October, fog thick as soup. The streetlights barely cut through it. I remember walking slow, my breath showing in the air. When I reached the front gate, I heard it. A single, low whistle, drifting through the cracked window upstairs. It was soft, almost curious. I ran home and never mentioned it again. Years passed and life moved on. Most of the houses on that side of town fell in on themselves or got torn down. The Whistler's house somehow stayed standing, though no one maintained it. The paint peeled, the porch sagged, and vines crawled up the windows. It should have collapsed years ago, but it never did. When I turned 30, I came back to Bracken Hollow to help my mom pack after my dad passed. She was selling the house and moving in with my sister up in Cedar Rapids. One night, after everyone was asleep, I went out for a walk. Nostalgia, I guess. The streets were the same, quiet and empty, the kind of silence that only small towns get, the kind that feels too big. Without thinking, my feet carried me toward the far end of Main Street, toward the Whistler's house. The moon was full, and the house looked even worse than I remembered. The shutters hung crooked, and the door was slightly ajar. I don't know why, but I felt this pull, like unfinished business from childhood. I stepped through the gate. The hinges groaned like something alive. The yard smelled of rot and cold earth. When I reached the porch, I noticed something strange. The air around the house was completely still. No wind, no sound. But when I looked down, the grass was moving. Not blowing, shifting, like something underneath was breathing. That's when I heard it. The whistle. Not faint like before, loud, close, coming from inside. I froze. It wasn't just one note this time. It was a pattern. 4 short notes, 1 long, then silence. Then again, like a code. I told myself it was just the wind. Maybe an animal, maybe the boards shifting. But the sound was too precise, too deliberate. I should have left, but I didn't. I pushed open the door. The air that came out was stale and cold, like an old basement that hadn't been opened in decades. Dust hung in the light from the moon. I stepped inside, every floorboard creaking under my weight. The house was full of clocks. Dozens of them. Mantel clocks, cuckoo clocks, grandfather clocks, all covered in cobwebs and grime. None of them ticking. All their hands frozen at the same time. 2:17 a.m. The whistle stopped. Then, from somewhere deeper in the house, I heard clicking. Slow, rhythmic, like someone winding a spring. I followed the sound to the kitchen. The table was still there, the one the old man had died at. A plate sat in front of the empty chair, dry and cracked, but still there. And then I saw it. A clock on the wall, small, brass, and perfectly clean. The only thing in the whole house not covered in dust. Its second hand twitched, then began to move. Tick, tick, tick. The whistle came again, this time right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty kitchen. I could feel the air moving, though, cold and steady against my ear, like someone leaning close enough to breathe on me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at my mom's house. I slammed the door, locked it, and sat there shaking. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, the power of old stories in a dark house. But the next morning, when I went to get my keys from the counter, there was something waiting beside them. A small grass gear, old but clean. I didn't go back to the Whistler's house after that. But a few nights before I left town, I woke up around 2 a.m. The wind was howling outside, and through the sound of it, I could hear something faint. A whistle. 4 short notes, 1 long. I got up, looked out the window, and saw nothing but the quiet street. Then, from the shadows near the end of Main Street, a light flickered, just for a second, like a reflection off glass. When I blinked, it was gone. I tried to go back to sleep, but as I lay there, I realized something that made my blood go cold. The clocks in the house, every single one, had stopped. And when I looked at my phone to check the time, it read 2:17 a.m.
There's a stretch of Highway 81 that runs through the middle of Kansas. Long, flat, and endless. Truckers call it the Gray Spine. It's mostly farmland and scrub, with the occasional gas station breaking up the emptiness. If you drive it long enough, the landscape starts to feel like it's looping. The same barns, the same roadkill, the same signs passing you by over and over again. I used to drive that route often for work, hauling used cars between Wichita and Omaha. It was routine, predictable.
until the night I found the gas station at mile marker 181. It was late November, cold, clear night. I'd left Wichita around midnight trying to make good time. Around 2:30 a.m., my low fuel light came on, and I realized I hadn't seen a gas station for at least 40 miles. I was too far out to turn back, so I just kept driving. Then I saw it. A flicker of light in the distance, a dim yellow glow like an old bulb. As I got closer, a faded sign appeared out of the dark. Harlow's Service and Fuel. No logo, no brand, just that. The station looked ancient, a squat concrete building with a rusted overhang and a single pump. There were no other cars. I pulled in, engine rumbling against the quiet. The pump looked like something out of the 1950s, the kind with rolling numbers instead of a screen. I half expected it not to work, but when I picked up the handle, the lights over the awning flickered to life. I filled the tank. The digits rolled smoothly. Too smoothly. The numbers moved faster than they should have, faster than the fuel gauge could climb. I let go of the handle and the clicking stopped. When I looked at the display, it said 6.66 gallons. I remember laughing nervously, trying to brush it off. A coincidence, I told myself, just a weird old pump. I walked up to the door to pay, but the station looked empty. The glass was fogged and the inside lights were dim. Through the window, I could make out rows of old snacks, dusty magazines, and a counter cluttered with cigarette cartons. A small TV flickered behind it, showing static. No one was there. I tapped on the glass. Nothing. Then the screen behind the counter changed. The static cleared for just a moment, and I saw myself, standing outside, looking in. The camera angle was slightly above me, like it was coming from inside the ceiling. I stared at the image, frozen. Then the static returned. The air felt heavy, like the pressure dropped all at once. I stepped back, turned toward my truck, and that's when I noticed something else. There were footprints in the dust around the pump. Bare footprints. Dozens of them. They circled the station, overlapping each other, leading off into the field behind the building. I don't remember deciding to leave. I just did. I jumped in the truck, slammed the door, and peeled out of there fast as I could. The lights over the awning flickered once more as I pulled away, and then went dark. I drove another 20 miles before pulling over to catch my breath. My hands were shaking. I looked at the gas gauge, full tank, same as always, but the odometer had reset itself. The trip meter read 000.0. I didn't go back on that route for months. But the next summer, I met another driver at a diner near Salina who mentioned the same stretch of highway. He said he stopped at a small place called Harlow's, and when he went to pay, no one was inside. He left cash on the counter, and when he came back out, his truck door was open. There were footprints in the dust. A few weeks later, I tried to find it again, just to prove to myself it was real. But when I reached mile marker 181, there was nothing there. Just flat land, a few fence posts, and weeds growing where the driveway should have been. I pulled over, got out, and walked the shoulder. The asphalt was cracked and faded, but near the ditch, half buried in the dirt, I found something. A piece of metal. It was part of a sign. The edge of a letter still visible. Arlo's. The rest had rusted away. When I got home, I looked it up. I found a short article from 1982, a small fire in a rural gas station outside Hays County. 2 people dead, the owner and his son. The building was never rebuilt. But here's the thing. The article listed the address, mile marker 181. That was over 40 years ago. I don't take that highway anymore. But every so often, on clear nights when I'm driving long distance, I'll catch a glimpse of a faint yellow glow far off in the dark, like a light over a forgotten road. And sometimes, when I check my rearview mirror, I swear I can see the reflection of rolling numbers on the windshield. 6.66. Then it's gone. They say ghost stories fade with time. Maybe that's true. But some things don't fade. Some things wait, sitting out there in the dark, under flickering lights and empty skies, still charging for the gas you never really bought.